Welcome to the NICU Dad podcast, a podcast for NICU dads by NICU dads. I'm Alex Zavala, a father to two preemie girls, Mia, who was born at 30 weeks, and Emerson, who was born at 27 weeks. Combined, my wife Jen and I both spent over 100 days in the NICU. After my last NICU experience, I started the NICU Dad. I did this to try and fill the gap of information and support that was lacking for NICU dads. Be sure and check out thenicudad.com, and hopefully you will find it a useful resource. In this podcast, we will cover many topics that NICU parents face, but from the NICU dad's perspective. Topics such as premature birth, bereavement, PTSD, and many others. These dads who you'll hear share their stories in hope of letting other NICU dads know they are not alone. Welcome to the NICU Dad podcast. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Rad White. Rad is dad to preemie twins, Rupert and Maisie, who were born at 29 weeks, 6 days in Australia. After Rad's NICU experience, he recognized a gap in support for NICU dads. He wrote the book Enter The NICU, which features past NICU dads. He did this in hopes to address this lack of support. He also started the NICU Beard Club to support dads during their NICU journey. He has an honors degree in psychology, and when not supporting NICU dads, he runs Rad White Marketing, a boutique sales and marketing business for lead generation.
I'm here with Rad White of the NICU Beard Club and also the writer of Enter The NICU, a special book that I think is just completely essential to any NICU dad. We're here with the talking to Rad today. We have some questions for him on his journey and how he got here and what brought him to come and be an advocate for NICU dads. So first of all, first question I have for you is, what was your NICU experience like for you and what did you have?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's really good to be able to share the message and hopefully some of the things that I can share with you today and some of the questions you asked me can help some other dads. I'll be wrapped. They might have to listen back to this podcast a couple of times to understand my accent, but if that gets the message through, then I'm more than happy. I had... I'm a late father, so my kids were born when I was 45, and my wife she was high risk. She was high risk of preeclampsia, and she was also 42, so she had the age risk as well. So we knew that going in. She had high blood pressure as well, so we knew that going in, and we were prepared, I guess, to a certain extent, but we didn't know what prepared really meant, I guess. So I remember it was around, it was 29 weeks and 1 day that Kirsten had a checkup at the hospital, and they had some concerns about one of the children, as it turned out to be Rupert, my son, had seemed to have some backflow in the cord, but they weren't 100%, but they had my wife come in earlier in the next few days to do another check-in. And in that next check-in, that's when I said, no, there's definitely evidence of backflow, and she wasn't going home. She was actually staying in and having a baby. And so that was 29 in 5 days. So I got the call, and I was at my desk. I was working for an energy company at the time, and I called the partnership role. And I remember I had a cup of tea on my desk, and I just dropped everything as soon as I got the call from her in tears, just saying, "You need to come into the hospital. Something's going wrong. I don't know what it is. They're trying to tell me that I don't understand what it is. Can you just get in here as soon as you can?" And I just dropped everything, left my computer, left my cup of tea, and just raced in. I jumped in the car, I was parked nearby, and just luckily the hospital was only probably 4 kilometres up the road, so I was able to get there pretty quickly. And then, she was just in tears. And I just spent some time with her, just sort of comforting her and not sort of trying to dive in, but she's clearly upset, just trying to help her through that first. And then she started sort of having a bit of a conversation with me about some of the stuff the doctors were saying with backflow, and we had no idea what that meant. And we'd also, in between that 29-week and 1 day visits, we'd also had a conversation with our obstetrician, who hadn't been told that we'd been in and hadn't been told there was evidence of backflow. So he was a little bit livid, and he told us not to do anything until they consulted him first. So we're kind of in this little bit of a limbo where we didn't quite trust the hospital staff that were saying we need to go in, and we're trying to contact our obstetrician, who just unfortunately happened to be away on leave for that day. So it was a bit of a tense time. As it turned out, my sister is a midwife, well-respected midwife in the circles in Melbourne, and so she was able to pull her strings and get his mobile number and called him and just explain what was going on. And anyway, he spoke to us and said, look, it sounds like you need to go through. And so it was just a few hours there. We didn't know what was going on. It was a bit confusing. It was a bit stressful in itself. So we then stayed overnight, and it was probably the worst night that we've ever had, I guess. And it's 5 years ago now, so I'm going to struggle with some of the actual terms, but we had the two little gadgets on to monitor the twins' heart rates, Dopplers, I think they're called, and one baby just kept moving, would not stay still. I know exactly who that one was. It's Maisie. She just doesn't stay still even now. So we know it was her. And then my son Rupert, who had the IEGR, he was jammed right in my wife's rib cage. So he was quite stable. He didn't move at all. He was the one that didn't come out. So we spent the night there. I remember it was just so dreary. It was just so stressful. And my wife was in a bed, and she'd sort of been injected with a few things to sort of stimulate the baby's some hormones and steroids and stuff. And I didn't really have anywhere to lie down or anywhere to relax. Not that you can relax. All I had was a chair. But by the time it got to sort of 3 a.m. in the morning, we're just trying to keep the Dopplers on the babies that kept moving. It's just exhausting. It was about 3:30 or something like that, and I was sitting on the chair, and my wife said, "Look, you have a little snooze if you want. It's going to be a big day tomorrow." So I said, "Okay, thank you." I nodded off. And no joke, I reckon I was asleep for about 15, 20 minutes. Then we heard a God Almighty scream in the next room, and it was a woman at the moment of giving birth to a child, because we're in the birthing suites. And my wife and I just sat bolt upright, like, what the hell was that? And we just started laughing. And it was such a great icebreaker. It was so intense, but it was such a great icebreaker. So I'm not recommending that people go and listen to someone else give birth as an incentive to try and break the tension, but it certainly worked for us. So anyway, I couldn't sleep again after that. But we ended up going in to sort of, she didn't have anything to eat, obviously, because she was having surgery, so I didn't have anything to eat either. Went into surgery, got a bit all dressed up and everything, and she ended up having a cesarean at 11 o'clock the next morning, I think it was. So that's a full 24 hours in hospital, and I brought her into the toiletry and that sort of stuff, so she'd brush her teeth and that sort of important things. Brush her hair, ready for the operation, so then we went in, and I think for the first time I think I really felt on the outer, I guess, was when they took her into the operation but didn't bring me in. They took her in first. Obviously there's some things there that I don't really see, and I completely get that, but I kind of felt like, you stay there, you come in later. And so anyway, we did that, and then they wheeled me in, and I sat down next to Kirsten, and it was just that experience of being in a cesarean. I mean, I've played a lot of football, and I've seen guys with broken legs, been knocked out, broken jaws, broken arms, fingers, run into players. I've seen some pretty full-on stuff, and just nothing prepared me for some of the sounds that I heard coming from the other side of that sheet. It was just full on. It was really full on. The biggest sound I remember was just a massive. It felt like someone threw a bucket of water on the floor. That was pretty much Kirsten's waters breaking. I just went, what the hell was that? And I remember just, I don't know, someone was watching me from behind, and I remember just kind of trying to gaze in, going, what's that sound over there? And someone's hand on my shoulder, with a little bit of pressure, pushed me back down towards my wife's face. And she focus on here, big fella. Don't look anywhere else. And so that was really helpful. And anyway, the kids Maisie came out okay. We hadn't named them at that stage. We didn't know if they were boys or girls, so it was a complete shock this when we had. But when I talk to other people about this, I tell them that, and out of context, this sounds really bad, but in context, I didn't know what the kids' faces looked like, because when the doctors picked the babies up, they just showed me the genitals. They just picked it up and said, here you go, you got a girl. And then same with my son. Here you go, you got a boy. And I didn't even know what their faces looked like, but I knew what their genitals looked like. It was just bizarre, not what I expected to happen. And so when I actually went and saw their faces in the little room next door where they were looking after them, making sure they were okay, and that's when I first got to see their faces. And funnily enough, whilst Rupert was the one that needed to come out, Maisie was the one that had, I think it's an APGAR score. I think her score just deteriorated quite rapidly after she was born. So they spent a bit of time, more time on her than on Rupert. And I just remember leaving my wife's side, which was really difficult to leave her side, just to go in the next room and see the kids. And Maisie's eyes were closed. She'd been awake, but then she'd sort of gone back to sleep, I guess. I don't know really, but she was quiet. I was just talking to her. And then I went over and saw my son, and his eyes were open. And I just looked in his eyes, and it was just sensational. It's just the first time I bonded with him, and I just told him what a champion he was and how proud I was of him to even be there, and what a great young boy he was. It was just magical. It was just so good. It was so good. And I was at that stage, I didn't really know what kind of danger they were in, I guess, or what kind of issues they were in or were going to face at that point. I was just so excited they were born, and they had a little journey, but didn't know really what to expect. And so shortly after that, the surrealness continued, and I had to leave my wife and had to head upstairs. And in Melbourne, you've got to go out down a hallway and then into a lift, and then across another hallway down to the intensive care unit. And it just feels surreal that you've got your new children that you can't touch yet in an incubator, but, looking like an iron lung from the 1920s or something, and just travelling through. And I had some really, really good people in the lift with me, and probably what really helps, if there's any NICU professionals listening, that what really helped was people just talking about what was actually happening. And just saying, it's a bit strange, isn't it, being in a lift with your twins that have just been born in a big box? Yeah, it is strange. And they're really Captain Obvious statements, but they were incredibly grounding and helped me just get through those next couple of stages. So we wheeled them into the intensive care unit straight down there, and I remember seeing other families watching me come in, and I remember I smiled and they smiled, and they're still good friends. The first people I saw, the first people I laid eyes on, they smiled, which was fantastic. And then, so I had the two kids in separate beds next to each other, but on either side of the ward. And I just remember, again, having this massively primal urge just to push all the staff aside and protect my kids, because I just wanted to get in there and look after them, because they were crying. Both of them were crying at this stage, and it just connected on a level I just didn't even know existed. So I had to resist that urge. So I didn't know what to do. So I just took photos. I took a lot of photos. And I had another NICU doctor come up to me and stand next to me, not in front of me, and not pointing it out, but showed me what was going on with each child. And I cannot remember what she said to me to ask me, but I know that it was incredibly grounding again for me just to have someone to stand beside me and say, okay, well, here's what happens, and the plastics over the top of them to keep them warm. They've got beanies on to keep their heads warm. They're going to get oxygen. They're going to get, they're going to get warm lights on them. Just took me through all the basics, just the pragmatic side of it. And that was pretty much the start of it. That's pretty much how we got in there. The kids were in there for 10 weeks and 14 weeks, maybe 10 weeks and 14 weeks. And so I had to go back up to my wife and just tell her what was going on. That was quite tricky. Luckily, I had 1,001 photographs to sort of show her, and then she just asked me the most basic of question: "How are the kids?" I went, "Oh, I think they're okay. I don't know." And I guess it was the first time I couldn't actually answer someone's question about how my kids were, and that's a really strange experience, because you kind of expect it. If someone asks you how your kids were, you say, "Yeah, they're good," but I just didn't know. Just did not know. That was the first experience I had of it, and the frustration of not being able to give my wife a straight answer, because I just didn't have a straight answer to give. So that's pretty much how I got into the NICU, how I joined the club, so to speak, before there was a club. It's always been an unspoken club, I guess, but But yeah, so that's how I got in, and it was just having twins. We were lucky because I think probably out of the 10 weeks that they were in the NICU together, they were in the same ward for probably 6 or 7 of those weeks. And probably, I think it was 3 or 4 of those weeks they were in separate rooms within the ward, so separate rooms within the NICU. So we had to sort of split our time. We couldn't actually get anywhere in. Sometimes you just couldn't get in the same room, which is frustrating. But yeah, that's just the way it goes. That's about it. I moved on. I guess I did. in terms of how I handled the time there, I've read a lot. They say not to buy expensive things, make expensive decisions, financial decisions when you're under a period of stress. But I completely ignored that, and I bought myself a $7,000 subscription to an economic news service, which was all about stock markets and the economy, what's happening in the world. But it was really geared around picking stocks. So I do stock tipping sessions afterwards if anyone's interested. But I think what I found was the dryness of all of that just helped center me and helped balance me against the highly emotiveness of not knowing what was going on with the kids. And I look back now in hindsight and see what the purpose of that and what it was doing for me. And it was just giving that dry economic insight, which I read to the kids. That's what I read. Every time I went in now, I think probably fair to say probably about 70% of my time, 67% of my time, I was reading something to the kids, and they were my economic or stock broking newsletters talking about companies that are on the verge of a breakthrough and what was happening in the United States economy, what's happening in the Australian economy, and so if they go up to the economists and stockbrokers, I'll know exactly why. And then it just felt like it was just calming to me. And so that was, and I also tried to, I did. I put my hand up as many times as I could to do cares, to do feeds, even any syringes of any medicines or anything like that. I put my hand up every single time because I thought my perspective was that the kids are born, they're now here, I am their dad, and I want to do everything I can for them. So that at the end of the day, I can look back and go, there's nothing else I could have done, everything I could do. And that was also for, one, I wanted to let them know their parents were there, and my wife was exactly the same, that they were there. But then also, too, if unfortunately didn't make it, that I wanted to feel like I'd done everything I could. I didn't want to have any gaps. I didn't want to feel like I missed anything or could have done more or anything like that. And I wanted to make, because it was touch and go there a couple of times. Both of them had, I don't know whether you have the blue lights in the NICUs in the States, but in Australia you have a blue light, which is pretty much brings the highly specialised medical people to your room quick smart, because basically it means the child is moments away from passing away. So we had that. I think we had it twice with Maisie and once with Rupert. Twice with Rupert and once with Maisie. So it was very close, and luckily that we got through that. But Rupert also had a version of NAC. There were 16 kids in the ward that got it. They didn't know how to put it in. He was the only one that didn't have to have surgery on his bowels to remove it, and fought through it, which was just incredible. So we were very, very lucky there. But yeah, I think between my wife, we were lucky. I worked 4 kilometres away from the hospital at that point, and she was on leave, so we'd go into the hospital together. We'd get in there between 7 and 8 in the morning, and she'd be there from 7 or 8 when I dropped off. I'd go in, spend half an hour to an hour with the kids, and then go to work. Generally by about 9. I'd be at work by about 9:30, and then she'd be there till about 3:30. Then she'd go home, and then I'd get in there pretty much about 5:30, and I'd be with the kids till 11 at night or something like that, on average. So that way the kids have 24 hours. They had sort of 17 hours, 18 hours of us being there, one or the other being there. And like I said, we're just very lucky to do that. There were some parents there were some kids that we saw that we were there all the time. We just saw some kids that didn't have their parents come in at all for whatever reason. And I really felt for those kids, and it's kind of going galvanised me to want to be one of those professional NICU cuddlers when I retire. I'll just go in there and hold other people's kids that can't get in there, so let the kids get some sort of human contact. And I'm still thinking about those kids even now that didn't get that from their parents, and ultimately I wish them well. But that's pretty much how it is. And I think probably the other funny story just on that is just that when the kids were scheduled to be born on the Australian Football League Grand Final Day, which is pretty much the equivalent of your Super Bowl, except
right.
Ours is Australian football. We don't wear pads, so it's a bit tougher.
I agree.
And I used to play state. I used to be a state level footballer, so I used to know a lot of guys who were playing in the pro ranks basically. And so anyway, my daughter was due, and the kids were due on the grand final day. So as it turned out, Maisie got released from the NICU on grand final day, and I've never driven slower in my life. I've never driven slower with my baby in the back of my life. And I was just so lucky it was grand final day because there's no one on the roads. Everyone's at a barbecue, everyone's at a picnic, everyone's doing something. And we left at about 2:30, which is when the game started, 2:30 in the afternoon. And I just got hyper vigilant. And I remember looking down the road, 100 metres down the road, what's that car doing? Is he turning or what's he doing? I just got so hyper vigilant about being so aware of who was around us and looking after my kids. So it was very fun. Very funny. But that's a pretty high level summary of what happened in the NICU experience.
Yeah, well, I think what you're describing right now is pretty much almost every NICU dad on that day when you do go home. That was literally, if my car could have had bubble wrap around it or some kind of force field, I would have gotten it. I think that could be the one time that all us dads are driving as slow as possible and as careful as possible. I remember going home that same way, and you didn't want to have a car next to you or anything. It was just talk about precious cargo. But I do want to ask you on there, it's something I like to call the NICU Dad Shuffle. And what I want you, if you can describe what it was like for you, where your wife is recovering from surgery. You have the two babies in the NICU. You still either have to run your business or, your work. Things at home still need to be taken care of. And I really like that you described stuff, about how primal this is. But I just want to, if you can describe what that was like for you. And then I know with twins, sometimes one goes home, before the other. And so shuffling even that, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I guess Kirsten was out of the hospital after 3 days, so that wasn't too bad. And she was able to move around after her first day. She had a wheelchair, so she had to move around, and she was very independent, still is, and so she was pretty determined to keep moving and be with the kids. So when I would go in, when she was in there those 3 or 4 days, she would generally be down next to the kids. She wasn't at her bed. So that side of it wasn't too bad. It was, I guess, the shuffle between the kids, like I said before, when we were in different rooms, the kids were in different rooms, that was a bit challenging because you wanted to be in the vicinity of each child so they could at least feel you around. Quite often when we had isolates next to each other, that my wife would sit next to one, I'd sit next to the other, and then, we could kangaroo care one child, but then hold another child's hand with the other free hand. So that way, it would probably be overstimulating, I guess, but it just gave us an opportunity to be next to the kids, and we'd swap. And so that was just really, I found that difficult, but it was just, I don't know, I just got into operational mode. I just dealt within the parameters I was given. I didn't like it, but I just got on with it. Probably the biggest impact, though, Alex, was when Maisie came home and Rupert had to stay. He wasn't ready to come home yet. And what we found was we were trying to give Maisie a routine home. Well, that's not true. we thought because they'd been so routinized at the hospital, we thought we'd give Maisie a bit of a free pass and go freestyle. We'll feed you when you feel like being fed, and and then it just didn't work. It just didn't work because she was in such a routine that when she fell out of it, it just didn't work. And so we thought, well, we consulted with you and said, no, routine's best for twins because otherwise you're going to be up all night feeding each one if they're on different schedules. And so that was really challenging. But so we're trying to get in there to see Rupert and give Maisie a routine, and it was just we ended up seeing Rupert significantly less than we were seeing before, and he was in there for 4 weeks, and he still actually wasn't ready when we spoke to the hospital. He was still being fed through a nasal gastric tube. So we did something quite unique, and we had to sign waivers and all sorts of stuff. But the hospital said they would train us. We were already doing it, but they said they'd train us in nasal gastric feeding. And we'd have to sign off that we've been trained and all that sort of stuff. And so we said, yeah, no worries, we'll do it. And interestingly enough, that experience has now given them the opportunity to do that with other parents, to allow other parents to take them home. And then in terms of the tube, obviously you hope your child doesn't pull the tube out, but if they do, then in Australia we have a maternal and child health nurse that's employed by our local council. And their role is to go around and visit each mother with their babies, make sure everything's okay. So if the tube came out, we could just ring that nurse, and she was normally visiting every week anyway, that she would come out and do it, or we'd take her into the NICU to get Ruby to get the tube back in. But he was generally pretty good. He didn't, I think it was probably that sort of 8 weeks afterwards, he was on the nasal gastric tube before they could take to the breasts. He was on there. So it was only done about 4 or 5 times we had to do it. So we brought him home because we just didn't feel it was fair to him, and he wasn't getting us, and he really needed it. So we did something about it and made an extraordinary request, which was granted.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I think it just goes to show, too, how important it is, the presence of the parents for the success of the NICU baby. It's one of those things that you can't, you can't fake. It's something magical. But I do want to get into, just to give a little backstory here, when I was doing research about NICU dads, I jumped online to try to do some research and couldn't find anything. Maybe a mention here and there from a blog or a post on some website where a NICU dad would share a story. But I found you, and you were the only thing that really was out there. I found the NICU Beard Club, and then I found Enter The NICU. And that was a huge find for me, and that's, why we're here. But what I really want to know, one is what gave you the idea of writing Enter The NICU, and kind of what was that process like for you?
Look, mate, I'm just so excited that that labour of love that I created has helped you and has given you ideas and some thoughts and inspiration. I mean, to me, I love hearing that. That's, when I was slaving away in the home office that I'm now sitting in at the moment of all hours, getting that written and interviewing people and everything like that. I mean, I just hoped it would reach someone, and I just hope that someone would read it. And you're that one person that's done it, so I'm happy. I'm super happy now, and now I want to try and reach more people and share what's in it, because it is. I wrote it. It's by dads for dads, and that's where I came from. Was that like you, 5.5 years ago when my kids were born, I just looked around and go, well, what is there for dads? And I'm sure they have them in the States. In Australia, we have antenatal classes or prenatal classes. And we even went to a special twins one, which was held at the same hospital the kids were born. And they just told us just gave us how to look after your child. And, we played with the toy dolls and made sure we didn't drop them and all that sort of stuff. But even in that specialised pregnancy group, about how to look after your child, no one spoke about going into intensive care. No one spoke about some of the challenges you'll have either physically or socially or mentally. They just weren't addressed. And I just thought that was such a it's not a criticism, it's just a massive oversight. And I've since discovered that no one can really answer me why, which is really funny. No one can actually answer me why. I think it's more a case of it's the way it's always been done. And sometimes things in a science-based profession like medicine and nursing, etc., sometimes it's really hard to change things because it's how things have always been done because it's based on science. But what we're talking about and what I thought was missing was the social element and the psychological element, the motivational element. How do you get through? How do you keep going when you have to go to NICU for weeks on end? How do you connect with people? How do you have conversations? No one warned us that when you have a child in the NICU, parents that haven't been through the NICU just don't understand, and it kind of goes over their head. It's just, no matter how well intended or how well intentioned that they are, they just can't understand the stress because they didn't really get very close to losing their own child. I mean, I don't want anyone to get close to doing it, but you know, people in the NICU have gone through that, so you have a different perspective of it. So there was that, and that was a big motivating factor because the hospital we went to is pretty much the best hospital in Australia when it comes to women's health. And if they're not even doing it, I mean, I hate to think what's going on in the other hospitals. So that kind of put a bit of a bug into me and a bit of fire. And then, you know, we ended up going through the process. And I was in the hospital there. There's the guy who heads up the intensive care unit there. His name is Carl Kuschel. He's an associate professor. Lovely guy. He and a team of consultants came up with the idea. He had a fellow come up to him. We bumped into a guy, a former dad of the NICU, and Carl. And I'd interviewed this guy. He's in the book, and said to Carl. Carl said, "Oh, how are you going? How's everything going?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, really good. You know, our baby's good and everything's well." And he goes, "But mate, I just collapsed in a heap about 2 weeks after she got home." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well," he goes, "I was just overwhelmed. Like, the whole experience of it was just too full on, and I just couldn't do it. Just couldn't get any further, and just couldn't face anything." So he pretty much had everything had pretty much stopped for him. And that's when Carl got the idea. And that fella by the name is in the book, Nick Mackay. Lovely guy, really amazing guy. And so I just thought it was so important to have him in the book and talk about his tips and his experience of it. So that's what got Carl thinking and the other consultants. He started thinking, all right, well, we're looking after the baby, and from a medical perspective, we're ticking all the boxes because the babies are leaving and hitting all the right milestones when they're leaving. But what about the parents? What are we doing for the parents? And they saw there's a lot of support for mums, which is great, which is perfect, and I'm super happy for that, and mums need it. But they realised there was nothing around for dads. And so what they created was a dads group. And I was one of the early participants in the dads group. Now, originally, I've got a little funny story here. Originally, it was called Fathers Group. And I saw these posters around the NICU which saying Fathers Group Wednesday, every third Wednesday, room, whatever it was. And I remember looking at that poster and going, Father's Day, why would my dad want to come to one of these? Like, I just didn't... I just didn't connect that I was a father at that point. I mean, I knew I was a dad. I didn't connect with father. To me, father is an older term, and it refers to my generation's parents. And so I think I'm a Generation Xer, and so I think I think dad is a more relevant term for me. And I think being a marketing guy, sales guy, I think the first thing I said was in the room, I said, you really should rename this. It shouldn't be called Father's Group. It should be called Dad's Group. And all the other dads, like 3 or 5 dads, it should be Dad's Group. And that was it. After that, it was just changed, which was hilarious. And Carl and his team of consultants, and one of them I've got in the book too, Rocco, he's a lovely guy. They do a walk around the ward on the Wednesday night. They now do it weekly. It used to be 3 weekly, but now the demand is so strong for it, they do it weekly. They went from every third week to every second week. Now it's every week, every Wednesday. And they have past NICU dads now that come in and will dial in or attend the group and support the dads. They still do a walk around. So they walk around the ward recruiting dads who are on the ward to get them to come down just for half an hour. And I remember they first approached me and they said, "Oh, look, we've got a father's group on tonight. Would you like to come down and just have a chat to other dads about what's going on?" And I went, "Oh, no, I'm okay. And like most guys, I think, just say, "No, I'm right, I'm okay. I'm fine. How dare you ask me," sort of thing. What are you implying? And they kind of got me into it because they said, well, it's just to sort of ask about. There's going to be consultants there, so you can ask any questions. They're going to talk about some of the things that are happening for your child and how they're progressing, and you can share that with some of the other dads about what they're doing. You probably learn something, and I know, okay. And I remember saying, okay, all right, because the payoff is you're leaving the time with your child to go and spend time with other men that you don't know, but you're not knowing what the payoff is from that group at this stage. So I remember walking down the corridor with them, and I go, if this is some sort of new age make dads cry group, I'm out of here in 5 minutes. I'm not going to go down this path. If I'm going to bawl my eyes, I'm going to do it on my own terms, not in a group of people I don't know. Anyways, it turned out it was nothing like that at all. It was sensational, and it was so good to talk to other dads. And one of the vivid memories I've got is was that I think it was my third or fourth one, and we're talking about kangaroo care. And kangaroo cuddling with the child skin to skin, and there was a dad in there who'd had a child in there for 2 weeks and hadn't had a kangaroo cuddle yet. And all the dads just said, "Oh, why not?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know, it was offered to me, but I was just a bit, I don't know, just." And virtually every day just went, "Mate, what are you doing? You've got to get down there. You've got to it's amazing. It'll change your life. You suddenly connect in a brand new way, and you will just know your child in a completely different way, and you'll feel different about yourself and about your relationship with them as a parent. It's brilliant. You've got to get down there." And we're all saying this, and we just went, I've got to go down there now. He just left the room and just went straight down and saw his kid and spoke to the NICU nurse and hooked himself up for a kangaroo cuddle. It was just amazing. It was legendary. It was absolutely legendary. It was just beautiful to see. And so we all kind of high-fived ourselves after that. We're so proud of ourselves that we encouraged another dad to do it. And just those little sneak peeks, this is all sort of as to what led me to write this book. They all just sort of churned in my guts for about 2 years. And I was having twins, you're pretty busy, and so I didn't really have a chance for any spare moments while I was working as well. And but I just knew I wanted to do something, and I just the power of other dads talking and suggesting was what really got me going. And I'm also, as I said before, I've played a reasonable level of Australian rules football, and club environment is very, very strong here. So you go and play in your local football club, or you get recruited to a club, even in the junior or in the suburban competitions. And it's a real lifestyle. You spend sort of 3 or 4 nights there. You play a game. You'll quite often have social events there. It's a real community. And that's always was mulling around in my head. And so I just, I actually just want to create a community of dads. And like a club environment, clubs have had hundreds, if not thousands, of players that have gone before the current crop of players that are playing. And there's honour boards, and there's roles, there's premiership flags and pennants and medallions and all sorts of stuff and trophies. And I just thought, well, why can't we have a club where people who've been through this experience, who are the legends of the club, who are the senior statesmen of the club, why can't they just share their knowledge with the rookies of the club? Because there's thousands of men. I mean, in Australia, I think it's 30,000. I think in America it's like 270,000 men that are going through this experience every year. And that's just phenomenal. And I just thought, why can't we draw some of that experience and give that to the rookies who are coming in, and just give them in a way that they can use it. So that's kind of where there's 2 components to the book. The one is how to survive your first 72 hours of NICU, and what to expect from an unexpected delivery. And the second part is the transcripts of the book, which, as a dad, I didn't want any sugarcoating on anything I read. I didn't want anything fluffy. I didn't want anyone to be sympathetic to me. I just wanted to hear it as it was. I didn't want to hear anyone to filter it. I just wanted to hear from other dads. I wanted to hear their words. I wanted to hear them say it. And I wanted to read exactly what they said, which is why I made the decision just to use the transcripts and not go down the path of editing and creating themes through the book. There are certainly recurrent themes, and that's more the role of the 72-hour guide, the survival guide. That's the one that deals with themes. So I just knew there was two different. The other thing that I had is I have my background at university. I've got an honours degree in psychology, so I'm fascinated by people as it is. And I've got a book, and I can't locate it at the moment. I'm looking around my office, I can't figure it. There it is. It's called How to Survive the Loss of a Love. And it's a book by Colgrave, Bloomfield, and McWilliams. It is a sensational book, and it works for loss of a partner, loss of a job, loss of a career, loss of anything, loss of a child, anything. This book can handle it. It's relationship oriented, but the principles are still the same. And that's where I got the idea. I just wanted something you could just use. There's something to be read, which is the transcripts, but then there's something you could use, which was the guide. So the guide you can just pick up. It's a few pages, and you can just read it, and you can get everything you need to know in about 79 seconds. I think is how quickly I could read it. So in less than 2 minutes' time, you could read everything that these 9 or 10 dads had put together to guide future NICU dads. So the concept is past NICU dads supporting new and future NICU dads. And that's how it all came about.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the format. I can't say enough. I think that Enter the NICU should be in every single NICU, and every NICU dad needs to take a look at it. And one of the biggest pieces is what you brought up. That guide for me was just so eye-opening. I wish I would have had something like that during my NICU experience. The stuff in there is exactly, and we all have different experiences. We all have different, lengths of NICU stays. But at the same time, there's so many things that resonate that are just so similar for each one of us that we go through and we experience, and we all experience things in our own ways. But it's incredible how many things are on that guide that almost every NICU dad can use in one way, shape, or form. But so what did you really learn by talking to all these other NICU dads? I know you got the stories and all that, but was there anything that you really took away that maybe you got that you didn't expect to get after talking to all these NICU dads?
Yeah, well, mate, you've segued beautifully there because I didn't know what to expect, I guess, when I started doing these interviews. And in fact, I was completely frightened of doing it because I didn't know what I was going to uncover. I didn't know if I was going to be able to deal with it. And I didn't know whether the dads on the other end of the phone when I was interviewing them were going to be able to deal with it either, whatever we brought up. Because it's a unique experience for every single dad. So I was kind of petrified. And I remember I made the first call. I remember just saying to him, I won't swear, I won't say what I thought in my head, but I just went, don't stuff it up, don't stuff it up. I use my stronger language with myself, but I think I probably worked it out what it was. So I think the thing that I really learned was, and it's very similar when you're NICU, don't assume that you know what's going on for another NICU dad. Don't assume you know what's going on for them because you don't know their story. But at the same time, as you mentioned, in beautiful segue, is that there is commonalities amongst us all. And I think in the way that I went about the book in choosing to focus on the experience of the dad and not the medical conditions that were faced by the parents. We spoke generally about medical conditions, about medical staff and how to relate to staff. But I just wanted to go at a very humanist level and just find out what worked for them. How did you manage? And those themes evolved naturally through the conversations. The only one question that I had that I scripted, which was the very, very first one, which was, how did you get to the NICU? It was the only scripted question I had. And then I let the guys pretty much talk, and each conversation I had, on average, I went for about an hour. Some guys spoke for 45 minutes. Some guys spoke for an hour and 15. It was incredibly cathartic for each of those dads, because it was the first time they'd had a chance to speak at length with someone, and someone who was genuinely interested, who understood what they were talking about. Because in a NICU, obviously, you've got time to sort of run around, and you only got sort of 5-10 minutes with each day. You don't get a chance to sort of unload. And then with my understanding of NICU, having been a 100-day stayer, I had a good idea of how it was as a beginner, as a middle, and as a long-termer. So I was able to cover and relate to quite a few different people. At the same time, I think from my perspective, what I learned about myself, I had to be ready to have that conversation. I couldn't do 3 or 4 of those in a day. It would just be too much for me. So I had to respect where I was at, and when I had the capacity to be able to handle the calls as well, because every time I had a call with them, I went back into my own experience and how that worked for me, and what didn't work. And I shared with them as much as they shared with me about what worked and what didn't. So I think what was amazing was that there were common experiences, and it really just came down to managing your partner or your relationship with your partner, the children, the medical staff, your work, how you handle family. They're pretty much the key things that came out. And they were consistent. Everyone had their own ideas. There's some brilliant ideas some of the guys had, which I'm like you. When I heard them, I was like, why didn't I know about that? When I was in there, I would have done a Facebook page for the kids as well, and just told everyone to go to the Facebook page. It's just brilliant. So it was good. I think the thing is, whilst I had my own NICU experience, when you're in NICU, you have your own sort of tunnel vision about your own experience, and it wasn't until I got out and spoke to other dads and realised we had similar but different experiences, and they managed it, and how they managed their experience was different. And it gave me a lot of aha moments, and it actually helped me in reading their stories and listening to them talk, and it gave me a way to cope and deal with my experience, and it made me feel like I wasn't the only guy that had gone through. And through no fault of your own, when you're going through NICU, you kind of isolate yourself in a way, because you become protection. You become the protectionist of your family, your cocoon. You start being the cocoon, and you want it to be that way. And that's that primal side of it that comes in. But when we come out of that, you've got to let go of the primal side. That's really hard to do. And so that's in having this experience with these amazing dads, and them sharing their story. I spoke to a lot of dads. Not all of them were willing to sort of go, on the record, so to speak, and share their story. And these guys did. 100% grateful for them for sharing it, and that their story is being reached all over the world, which is just unbelievable. And they did it because they wanted to help other dads coming in after them. So I just learned so much from them and about myself as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's amazing. Well, let me ask you, with doing all this, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give another NICU dad?
The biggest bit of advice, I would say, would just be to acknowledge your situation, acknowledge where you're at, acknowledge that you're in intensive care, acknowledge that your partner's probably going to have a cesarean, acknowledge that you might be there depending on how early your child is, but you can reasonably expect you're going to be there until your expectation date, and just accept it. Don't fight it. I did see dads that struggled with it, that couldn't cope, and there were dads that were like, my child shouldn't be in NICU because for whatever reason they just couldn't accept it. The dads that accepted it and got on with it as quickly as possible had the better time, and were less impacted by the scenarios and the difficult situations, because they very quickly just got on with it and started dealing with facts and just became very operational. I guess the other side is I'm generally a very positive person, so I experience a lot of the world with hope. But that was severely tested in the NICU because sometimes it was dangerous to hope. Because we're all hoping for a linear outcome with our child, but it's not linear. It's 2 steps forward, 3 back, 1 step forward, 2 back, 3 steps forward, 4 back. It just doesn't go smooth and linear, and you kind of want that linear. And so I guess the thing is just to check your expectations at the door, because your expectations aren't what's going to help the child. You need to respond and make the child the centre, and work from there.
No.
I mean, the guide's got 32 different tips from all the other dads as well in terms of what's their best advice. But that's mine. It's just manage yourself, manage your own mindset. That is the most powerful aspect.
Yeah, that's so well said. I mean, checking the expectations at the door. That's I don't know of a truer statement. You're absolutely right. It is back and forth, and it definitely does not go the way we planned it. You shouldn't even have a plan when you walk in.
No.
But I do, and I don't know if anybody's ever asked you this or so, but do you have any advice for past NICU dads? Do you think? I mean, we always say, this doesn't stop after the NICU.
No, it doesn't.
Things still keep going. It's a process, and we all know. But for past NICU dads, do you have any advice for them, or anything you would recommend for NICU dads that might be out 5 years, 4 years, or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, look, I mentioned before I spoke to a lot of dads. I did a lot of news conferences, I seen a lot of newspapers. I was on the national broadcaster here, on the radio, speaking about the NICU Dad, the book and the process and the fundraising will be done. And I'd had a lot of dads that had contacted me through that. One dad in particular sticks in my mind, which was a guy who was in his 50s, was a farmer out in regional Victoria. Heard me on the ABC, which is the regional radio, and he contacted me, I think about sort of 4 or 5 times, and he said to me, look, he goes, I had a child in the NICU, sort of 30 years ago. And I said, okay. I said, do you want to have a chat about it? He said, look, I would love to have a chat about it, but I just can't. But I really want to chat to you about it, but I just can't. And I think there's a lot of guys like that it's kind of, to me that's a fellow who's bottled up the experiences and the emotions that have gone on for him, the things he's seen, the things he's experienced. And now he probably would have had a tougher go of it too, because 30 years ago the NICUs were completely different. I mean, the survival rate was significantly lower. His child survived, and the survival rate now is up in the 90s in the Western countries. So it's really amazing. We're very lucky that medicine's advanced. The only thing I would say to people who've been a NICU dad who haven't spoken about it, and it might help, just either get in touch with one of the NICU groups that are around. Hand to Hold is the one this is going through. There's some great resources there. There's some amazing resources that I know of. I think March of Dimes has got some great stuff as well. In Australia, there's 2 standout organisations, after mine, of course, called Miracle Babies. Miracle Babies. If you Google Miracle Babies Australia, you'll get a brilliant website, and they've got so much material. Probably the best thing they've got in there is they've got interviews with families. It's not so much dads, but it's families, and they've got them sorted by the week of prematurity of the child. So if you want to go and hear what a family who had a 23-weeker or a 27-weeker or a 32-weeker, what their experience was like, go on there and look down the list and just go and listen to what those families had to say if you want to connect that way, because that is a really good connector. And the other one is Life's Little Treasures. I do a little bit of informal ambassador work for, but not a lot. But they have an amazing app They've got an app which is a NICU baby journal, which is incredible. But probably the most powerful thing they've got is they've got a NICU dictionary. So if you download that and you're hearing words in the NICU and you don't know what the term is, you can get that app from Life's Little Treasures. If you Google Life's Little Treasures Australia, you'll get to the website and find that, and that app just gives you all the terms. So that way, when you're talking to the doctors and the doctors are doing their rounds, they can tell you these things. Just write the words down. Don't try and spell them properly. Just get the words right. You get the sound of it, and then you can look up later. You can do that stuff later, but just have that relationship. So for those dads, I would just say they're probably not even realising. They might have a bit of a gut wrench knowing that there's still something there that they don't want to talk about or they avoid talking about it. I would just say, either speak to a dad's group, or if you don't want to do that, just ring a psychologist. I think I've given this example to people before. When I say ring a psychologist, ring someone who wants you to talk about it, who won't necessarily prescribe something for you for it. That's going to be a better outcome for you. So just have a conversation with someone and talk it out. And a lot of people say, I don't need to. A lot of guys will say, I don't need to talk about it. I've got my mates, or don't talk about it. I say, but you know what? You could cut your own hair as well. But why would you? You get someone to do it. Someone who knows what they're doing. You could build your own car. You could build your own house. You can build your own driveway if you want to, but why would you? Why don't you just get a professional to come in and help you with it? That's the same way I look at it as well when it comes to a psych. If there's something that's still there, or you think there might be something that's that's affecting you, or just speak to a professional. It's just the best thing you can do. And I say this as an advocate for families and not necessarily for dads, because it'll make you a better unit in your family, and it'll make your family better as a result of doing that.
Exactly. Yeah, well, especially with seeing all the numbers and that are coming out of dads suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and, the different cases of PTSD, and how NICU dads now are, the stresses that they're dealing seem to almost be even greater than NICU moms. And the numbers that you're talking about, the NICU dads in the States and Australia and just around the world every year, we're talking about a lot of guys, and a lot of stories, and, that either get shared or don't get shared. And I know for me, every time I do tell my story or, about our NICU stay, I feel a little better. And, especially when you get in the dad's group. I don't think we can say enough about the dad's group and the sharing that goes on, and how beneficial that is to NICU dads. But,
that's so true. And talking about it is really powerful. And even if it's to the point of speaking to your friends about it, because the default people fall into is not talking about it. But if you talk to your friends about it, and you can say to your friend, look, I just want to tell you this, I just need to unload this a bit. Can I just unload with you for a bit? Most friends will go, yeah, no worries. And so that you can just unload in that way and just sort of tell them. You're not complaining, you're not doing anything, you're just getting it off your chest. And the power of that is that you've just created a soldier that's now going to work on behalf of NICU dads in his network.
Yeah.
You've got someone who now understands or has a sense of the problems, and then if he comes across someone else, or he's someone else who's had a premature child, hey, I've got a mate who's done that. Maybe I could see whether you guys can have a chat or have a conversation. I mean, that's, to me, if we could get that working, if that can just be the default for people to move into, where past NICU dads then get to mentor new NICU dads, that's sensational. I think your organisation does that anyway, which is, I think, just brilliant.
Yes, I completely agree. I actually had that happen to me this week. A friend of mine had a baby, a 26-week baby in the NICU, and her sister and some friends have already reached out to me. And, it's one of those things. I think you're absolutely right. Once we get that ball rolling and people start seeing and understanding, and I think we're there. Things are definitely going to start growing.
And I think, just on that, quite often going through the NICU, I think a lot of men and myself, I think I initially saw it this way too, just saw it as a negative experience or a blip on the radar, and not something to be shared or talked about. But I think what's really worked for me, and I think from the other dads that I've spoken to, when you flip that around and say, you know what, being in the NICU has been a gift. It's been a gift because it's actually, for me personally, it's actually made me meet these other dads and put myself out there and have conversations, meet yourself, and have the opportunity to share this with other dads. And now that's a gift. Now that I've worked through this, I feel like I've got a gift. I've got to share that. And it's selfish for me to keep that to myself, which is why I want other NICU dads to sort of step out and contact, even if you contact your NICU to say, look, I want to help other dads. That's probably a really simple way to do it. Use what you've got because it's a gift. And there's so many men that have experienced it that are not sharing that gift. And I really think that it's a one way of contributing. And if you give to charity, if you donate, or if you contribute in any other way, this is one way you can really make a difference. And it can be as personal as you like it to be. But this is one way to really make a difference and use the gift that you've been given in life.
Well, Rad, I just want to thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you do. Enter the NICU, the guide for the first 72 hours in the NICU, and the Beard Club, the NICU Beard Club. I just really, do we want to throw out the word pioneer? I think you're definitely doing some big things, and I think it's only the beginning. For all of us on this, I think NICU dads, we're going to start seeing more and hearing more about it. But I just want to thank you for your time today. And, I recommend any NICU dad, friend of a NICU dad, or you even think somebody might be a NICU dad, go out and get Enter the NICU. It's so essential. Get the guide. At least look for it online. Google Rad. He is Australian, by the way, if you haven't been able to tell. But definitely, show some support, and I think you won't. It'd be super beneficial. Well, thanks a lot, Rad.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. I really appreciate it. And if all men can use their gift, that's all we really want them to do.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. Once again, please take a look at thenicudad.com. We continue to grow the list of resources we are bringing NICU dads. To my fellow NICU dads, good luck, and remember, you are not alone.